for joining us. Let me begin with a little context and background. The Gratiaen Prize is an annual literary prize for the best work of literary writing in English by a resident of Sri Lanka. It was founded in 1992 by the Sri Lankan born Canadian novelist Michael Ondaatje, with the money he received as joint winner of the Booker Prize for his novel The English Patient. The prize is named after Michael Ondaatje's mother, Doris Gratiaen. Administered by a trust in Sri Lanka, the Gratiaen Prize accepts printed books and manuscripts in a range of genres, including fiction, poetry, drama, creative prose, and literary memoir. And these are assessed by a panel of 3 judges appointed by the trust. Our guest this evening is an inspiration to all aspiring writers of any age, and we are so very pleased that she has agreed to join us today. Carmel Miranda was announced the winner of the prestigious and much coveted Gratiaen Prize 2020 for her debut novel, Crossmatch. By profession, Carmel is a consultant anesthetist, and we are delighted to welcome her back to a session by the British Council Library. Carmel was born, grew up, and schooled in Colombo. She studied medicine at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo. By her own admission, she has no background in creative writing. And we hope this particularly and all she has to say will give courage to anyone who joins us this evening and who dreams of becoming a writer. Carmel, welcome back and congratulations from us all at the British Council Library on your wonderful achievement.
Thank you, Mrinali. Thanks, and nice to be back with
I'm
you.
so glad. And your book is now part of our collection, I must tell you.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
it's available to be borrowed. Shall I jump right in and ask you? I'm going to bombard you with questions this evening. So I'm going to
Okay.
jump right in. Okay. So I saw in an interview that you had given, you had said that you are thrilled to have won, especially given that you did not have a background in creative writing, and that you hope that this will encourage other writers out there to take up their pens and come out with their stories. Could we talk a little bit about this and why you said that?
Yes, because I think the literary world in Colombo, in Sri Lanka, is quite a closed world. And over the years, I've seen the same names appearing again and again. And I thought it would be quite difficult to break through. And this was a challenge for me. So, I mean, I've proved that you can do it even without any background in, literature or creative writing. You just need to do a little bit of research and put in a bit of hard work.
I don't know about a little bit, but you are a scientist by training. So, how did you come to this creative writing? So, yeah, the research part I can understand. That would be part of your training as well. But the creative writing?
Well, I don't think science and creativity are mutually exclusive, Mrinali. I mean, a lot of scientific breakthroughs only happen because the scientists indulge in creative thinking. You need to think creatively to formulate hypotheses and new ideas. I mean, think of Da Vinci, for example. He was a scientist and an artist and
Yes.
very
Yeah.
creative. And if you take doctors, physicians in particular, if you look at literature, there's a long tradition of physicians who've turned author. I mean, Sherlock Holmes was created by a doctor.
Yeah.
Then what about Michael Crichton, who gave us Jurassic Park and Andromeda Strain? He was a doctor. I mean, I can think of a lot of. What about Robin Cook? He
Ah,
wrote
yes.
he
Yes.
wrote that one of the first medical
Puma and
thrillers. Yes, so
yes.
he was a
Yes.
doctor, and then you have a lot of other names as well. A.J. Cronin, Somerset Maugham, and even Chekhov, I think, was a physician. So it's not a new thing.
Right. How many of them were anesthetists, do you know?
None that I'm aware of,
I'm
Minali.
just teasing. But I suppose, but how did you come to the creative writing part? When did you decide that this was also something you wanted to do?
Well, for me, creativity is more about getting away from my day job. So it's a way of winding down and stress relief to indulge in something creative. So over the years, it's been various things: drawing, painting, you name it. And this time, I indulged in creative writing. It's a way of,
Okay.
I mean, it's really a way of uh, escaping from day to day work. You know, you lose yourself in another world. It's recreational.
I'm going to come back to your drawing and painting comment a little later. Okay. You have also said that other writers should come out with their stories. How did you come out with this story, Crossmatch?
Well, um, I wanted to write something different, Minali. I wanted it to be about Sri Lanka, set in Sri Lanka, but different from the usual Sri Lankan novel. And then I realized that with my background, I was sort of uniquely placed to write about medicine because of my exposure to medicine. So I decided to make it what is called medical fiction, which is quite a big genre outside of this country. I don't see think there are very many books of that genre written here, but I and it's quite popular even among
Yes.
non-medical people, and I'm quite a fan of it as well. So I decided to make this the background.
Mm.
And about the story, there are two threads in the story. There is the actual puzzle or mystery itself, and for that I used I was used some real life events, situations that have happened maybe here and even in other neighboring countries, and things that I've come across in my practice as well. So I use that as the basis of the puzzle, the mystery story, and I wove the story around that. And of course, there's the other story, the other thread, which is the personal story of the protagonist, Lotus. And I mean, in every good detective story, the detective also has something going on in his life, right? So there's a personal story for her as well. And that was, I just made that up. That is my imagination. I made up that story to make it interesting.
Yeah, but you're right. Medical sort of whodunits are pretty popular. Yeah. Um, I loved how well, and I hope you're not going to mind me saying this, how you have used language. I really couldn't put the book down. It just flowed, and I just almost read it at a stretch because it kept me engaged. And even the medical and scientific concepts, you had made them so very accessible to your reader. You hadn't complicated it at all. And I mean, at a workshop, I heard they say a reader should walk through a novel. I thoroughly enjoyed the walk, Carmel. So thank you very much.
Thank
But
you.
I'm curious to know, what is your process? How did you make it so accessible?
It's difficult to talk about a process, Vinali, when I've only written one book. So I'll just tell you about what I did.
Okay,
But
tell us about this process.
I can tell you what I didn't do. What I didn't do was start at the beginning, go on to the middle, and then write the
Okay.
end. I didn't write it like that. What
Okay.
I did was when I had this plot in my mind, and whenever a particular scene in that plot came to mind, I would write it down, irrespective of where it occurred in the story.
Hmm.
For example, I wrote the ending, long before I finished the book because that ending was there in my mind. So I
Right.
wrote it
Okay.
down. Then, when
Okay.
I had all these bits and pieces, these scenes,
Hmm. Hmm.
then I wrote the filler bits to join them. Uh, I don't know whether that's how
No, no,
other
no.
people write books, but that's what I
Who
did. So I
cares?
had
You
these
made a
major
wonderful
scenes
book.
going on, and
Yeah.
uh, these filler bits to join these scenes. And uh, and the beginning, I mean, I wanted to the beginning of a book is, I think, very important because that's when you
Yes.
grab the reader's attention, and if you don't get their attention in the first couple of pages, you lose them.
Yes.
And from experience, I can say that. So I wanted to choose a really dramatic scene for the beginning, and although this book is around a death, I decided not to start with a death because, um, compared to death, actually birth is also quite dramatic, and birth involves a lot. It evokes a lot more positive emotions in a person. And whenever there's a baby, people go a bit gaga. So I decided to start with a birth rather than a death. And I
Okay.
thought that would, so that was the beginning. But again,
Right.
I didn't write that at the beginning. I put that in later. So it didn't go quite in order, but
Hmm.
that was my process. And I'm not sure about this mirror
Ah,
phenomenon that you talk of, but in the
yeah,
book,
yeah.
if you read the beginning and then when you read the end, there is a bit of a tie in there where the end reflects what
That's
happens
right.
in the beginning. So there
Yeah. So
is a sort of a mirror thing, but maybe not exactly the thing that you were referring to.
no, no, no. I think because I've been to a couple of workshops myself and dabble a bit. So, yeah, this was what this particular author was saying, that he was trying to, he looks for that, he looks for, so that there is a resonance in the reader's mind, that
Yes.
you end kind of where you began. So it sort of
Yes. I
ties
mean,
up
I
with
think
you.
that is there in this book to a certain extent.
It is there, it is there. So I mean, that's what I meant by process. i'm
Yes.
sure I'm sure there are people, I don't know, there must be people who go chronologically. Yeah, I suppose. So I mean, if I wrote a book, I would use an Excel sheet. I don't know whether you did something like that.
No, but
So
I had a sheet and I did write all these and a few arrows and things like that. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, yeah.
to sort of plot the timeline.
Someone who had been to a workshop conducted by Vikram Seth, when he, about how he wrote A Suitable Boy, said that he had all these different colored yarn tied to the top, and
Okay.
he kept drawing the yarn every time, like two people collided, he would draw those two colors and knot them together or something, and eventually he had ended up with this beautiful piece of art. And I was fascinated because I suppose that's how he could show how his mind was working. I didn't go to the workshop myself, this is what I heard. But so I always think of a writer doing all this like a spider, doing this web in their
Mhm.
mind. So I was wondering how you sort of put it out visually. So yeah, you should save that piece of paper with your arrows and all. Okay, so I'll skip the question about mirrors because I think we already covered it. But they also talked about this, the attraction of writing and the fear of not knowing how to set about it. So how did you overcome that? You know,
Oh, that's a bit of a difficult. That's a difficult question. I mean, when
you just wrote
something,
it,
yeah. When I mean, one you get that feeling that there's something you need to put down, and
right?
you
Okay.
just obey that instinct.
Clearly, you didn't procrastinate. You went for it, which is very good. I think that is also an important thing to tell people who want to be writers and to write. Either they don't even begin, or they never share what they have written. Did you share what you had written? Like, did you share bits and pieces with people as you
Yes,
wrote?
I'll talk a bit more about that later on. Yes,
Okay,
Minali.
fine,
Yes.
fine. I also want to ask you: did you write about people you knew, and did you draw from this inner sea of memories and experiences?
I didn't write about real people that I know because I don't want to get sued. But so I mean, I made up all the characters, but I may have used traits and personalities of people who I have met, but I mixed and matched them so that they were not like any real person.
I know Sri Lankan authors who clearly write about people they know, and like people read the book and say, "That's me, that's me." That's fine. I think I think people love to do that. I think it's quite flattering to read a book and read a bit about yourself. So I don't think they will sue you for that. I think people think they will sue you, but I mean, and you haven't been unkind about anybody. I mean, you have generally, been pretty positive. So. Oh, people will be very, very, very taken aback, Carmel, that they're not starring in your book.
No, in fact, I had a lot of people asking me whether so and so, referring to a particular character, was
Yes.
that based on this particular person, but I had to tell them no.
Okay.
At least that's the official version.
And I also appreciated how you describe places, because I mean, you have set it in Sri Lanka, and every time when I was reading, I kept thinking, I know that place, but I really didn't know that place. You had taken very familiar places and you had done something to them. What was that? How did you
Well,
blur
this
your locations?
well the story is set in Colombo, and I
Yeah,
wanted the reader to get a Colombo feel, especially, I mean,
right.
Sri Lankan readers to feel that, I know this place. And because I think that when you recognize a place in a book, that means something to you. So but I didn't, so I used a lot of real places, real street names, etc. But you're right, I did blur them a little bit because I didn't want it to make it too real, because I didn't want people to think, gosh, this event happened in my street, or I didn't want to make it too real. So just to keep it fictional, I changed things a little bit, but just still kept the feeling that it was about Colombo.
So did you have to go to locations actually and sort of look at them again before you wrote about
No,
them?
I more or less used places that I was quite familiar with already.
Okay, all right. So some writers speak of having to fight for the very first sentence. What was your experience?
Yeah, I think all writers would like to start off with that great first sentence in a book. I mean, there are so many classic examples in literature, and there. I mean, I don't know whether I succeeded. But what I decided was, I thought about, what about that first sentence, but I thought I won't kill myself over that. Either it happens or it doesn't happen. So yeah, so I didn't, lose any sleep over that first sentence.
Okay. I also appreciated your introduction and your description of characters, not overdressed or overstated, but enough to give the reader an idea of the nature of the character from the sound of the narrator speaking of that person. And you gave room for our imagination as well. What was that like, working on your characters? And as you said before, you collated bits and pieces from people you already knew, but you also came up with completely independent fictional characters.
Well, in medicine, Mrinali, some of the characters, from the point of view of the student, and we are
Hmm,
looking at this through a medical student's eyes.
correct.
Some of our teachers and consultants were very, very colorful characters who made lasting impressions on us. So
Right.
I think I may have, described them, gone to town a little bit in describing them, because these are characters who really, you they leave an impression on the student. And their eccentricities, the way they look, the way they dress, I have described them in quite in detail, because that
Mhm.
is what we look at when we are students. The other characters, I mean, I didn't do this consciously, but
Right.
now that you say it, I
Mm,
realize that this is what I have done. And but the other characters, I think I just described them enough to give a feel of their
mm, mm.
character. Not too much, because again, I don't like long descriptions,
Yeah.
and just enough to give a flavor of their character, and in proportion to their importance in the story.
But I loved it. All your people were real, and that's, I think, a real challenge for a writer. And I mean, it's wonderful, Kamal. It's a lovely balance, and I was very
Thank
grateful
you.
because I tend to read a lot, and sometimes I can't find the person at all. Or sometimes I'm just fed up because I know too much about that person. So it's a very good balance.
Mhm. Thank you.
What was your discipline? Did you write every day?
No, I didn't write every day, Mrinali. In fact, I've already said that it was more like a hobby,
Mm,
recreational,
mm,
and I wrote in my spare time whenever I had the time. And sometimes I would not look at my writing for even a month. I would just leave it because I
mm.
didn't have the time, which actually is quite good, I think, to leave it for long periods of time and then go back to it, and look at it with new eyes. And this is why I mean, it dragged on for years. I only wrote a little bit at a time, and I didn't have time to write every day. In fact, I don't think I could write every day.
Hmm, hmm. How long was it in gestation?
About 3 years, and then another year just sitting on it and wondering what to do with it.
I want to ask you about the editing process as well. So, This being a writer, was that something you always wanted to add on to your list of like things Carmel can do, kind of?
Actually, honestly, I never thought of this seriously till a few years ago, and I think what brought it on was I've been reading a lot recently in the last 5 to 10 years, and some of the books I read actually were they moved me so much, and I started to wonder how did the writer write this? How did he write something that could move somebody so much? So, and I started to look at these books differently and the mechanics of what they had done, and then I started to wonder whether I could do something like that, write something that produce a readable book. So that's how it started. It's all very recent. I've never written, in my childhood or in my young age.
Or you didn't keep like a diary or a little sort of book that you
Yeah,
wrote
yeah,
short
those,
stories?
yeah, those, yeah, but
Okay.
nothing very serious. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And you talked a bit about this medical whodunit. You said that's a particular genre that appealed to you because of your profession. But if you weren't, I mean, okay, you are a doctor, but did you consider any other genres while you were thinking about a book, or was it always this genre?
Well, it was this to start with because I thought, I wouldn't have to look around too much for to find material for the background because I already had it. So, which is
Mm.
why I started off with this. But I mean, that's not the reason. I mean, I didn't look at other types because this was a challenge I set myself, and I thought, what shall I write? What shall I make it about? And I
Mm.
realized that I could write enough about this field.
Well, it's more than writing about the field. It's a whole wonderful story. It's really a good whodunit. It's like till the very end, you're kind of like, you caught me by surprise. So I hope your readers also will actually go out and explore this wonderful book. Did you edit it yourself, or I don't know, because this is one of the hardest stages I'm told of the process. Because to honestly look at what you have written and not to be in love with it, and to have the courage to say this bit has to go, this bit has to go, and to actually edit or have someone edit with you.
I Yes and no. I did a lot of self editing, the initial stages before I showed it to anyone else. And then, say, I would say it's like 70-30. I did about 70% of the editing myself. And then after I showed it to a few people, I was guided by them. And yes, some of them did tell me, like one in particular told me to lose some chunks of it, which I did quite sadly. But then I realized that there was a reason for that. Yeah, so I did
Okay.
take out some bits which I liked. But if I had left it, it would have made the story too long, and
Yeah.
I don't think it would have added to the story.
Yeah, but you tend to be in love with what you have written, right? It's something you
Yes.
have
Yeah.
created. So
Yes.
yeah. You have said that the fact that you did not have a background in writing will encourage other writers out there to take up their pens and come out with their stories. Have you any do's and don'ts for them? Some
Um,
useful little strategies that helped you when you wrote Crossmatch, like little tips you can give them.
well, when I started to write Rinali, I suddenly discovered that there was this huge thing called creative writing, which was a discipline by itself, and you had workshops and courses and degrees and master's degrees, and I don't remember all this being a thing when I was young. So it took me by surprise. And then of course I didn't have access to any of these things, but I did the next best thing. I turned to the internet, and
Right.
I did find a few resources there. There are lots of aids and tools that writers can use. Not a lot, but I
Mm.
did find them quite useful about creative writing. But mostly what helped me was other books. Because as I said, when you read a book that you like, then you think, what is it about that book that appealed to you? This book has a good beginning. Why is it a good beginning? Why is this ending so good? And then I learned more from actually reading other books. because I don't know whether it was a good thing or not, but I didn't really go for any creative writing courses or not. I think it would have been a different book if I had, had more help in that field. And the other thing I can say is that if you can get other people to read what you have written, and I was fortunate also there because I happened to meet a couple of writing groups who help. We used to meet regularly and read each other's writing, and you get a lot of critique and feedback from them. So they helped a lot as well. But even if you can't, don't have access to writing groups, it's important that you show someone what you have written, because otherwise it's all very subjective.
Yes. I think we've talked so much about Crossmatch. Um, shall we share a reading? Would you like to do a short reading, Carmel, from
Okay, just
the
give me a
book?
second.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to read the section from the very beginning of the book, Minali.
Okay.
And I talked earlier on about how I decided to start with birth rather than death, because these are
Yes.
both things that happen in hospitals, but I decided to go with the birth because I thought that was quite attention grabbing. Okay, I'll start now. I think about the baby and wonder what it will be named. I know the naming process is likely to be involved. The parents might consult an astrologer who will be informed of the date, place, and precise time of birth. Using this information, he will draw up an astrological chart, the horoscope, a map of the heavens at the particular moment in time the child was born. He will then pick a set of auspicious letters or sounds from which the parents will choose one to be the first part of their offspring's name. If the child is lucky, it will escape relatively unscathed, with a name that is short, simple, and easy to pronounce. But more often than not, it would be long and unwieldy, a slew of syllables strung together. Or they might simply name the child after a popular cricketer or film star, or worse, a politician. Why do parents burden their offspring with names that they misguidedly think would make them, the offspring, special? A high pitched scream pierces the air and snaps me out of my reverie. I freeze, gloved hands clasped in front of me, forgetting for an instant where I am. There is a gush of blood. It forms a crimson pool on the polythene sheet, then wells up and breaks up into rivulets that zigzag their way to the edge of the bed and drip into a cracked white enamel pail, each successive drop taking longer to trickle down as the blood slowly thickens into dark, glistening, jelly like clots. The space I am standing in feels cramped and claustrophobic. There are three of us in the cubicle, and the bed occupies most of it. Faded mustard colored curtains, which had probably once been a bright yellow, are drawn snugly around us, and above, a ceiling fan rotates slowly, circulating eddies of warm, humid air. The midwife, oblivious to my catatonic state, performs a quick maneuver and looks up beaming, holding something in her hands. Something pink and shiny and wriggly and alive. It's a girl. She makes the announcement triumphantly, as if she personally arranged for this to happen.
Thank you, Kamal. It is always such a privilege to hear an author read from their own work because you then when you read the book you can hear the cadences of the writing. Thank you. So that was The Birth. And I love that little comment you make about burdening children with certain names. I can empathize. So, but to draw something out from the opening of the book, which you just read, and to go back to the reference of the name, um, no, I will not do that. I want to ask you this without giving too much away about the plot, and which was rather intriguing to me. You have described this as a medical whodunit, and a novel that broke all the rules of story. No, it has, your book has been described, you haven't said it, as a medical whodunit and a novel that broke all the rules of storytelling. I was particularly impressed by the deeper issues and the themes you wove into your story. Why did these particular issues resonate with you?
Well, I thought of using the story as a vehicle to bring out some other issues rather than it just being a mystery and solving the puzzle. So one of these things was the medical field itself. I wanted it to give a behind the scenes look at what happens, um, especially in medical training, because very little is written. Or I mean, everybody talks about, there's lots of fiction about doctors, but not that much about the medical students. So
Hmm.
just to give an idea of what medical students go through when they train, and how actually vulnerable they are when they start off, and how they gradually become, desensitized. So I wanted to just focus on that a little bit, and also the way they look at, doctors are looked upon, quite revered in the community, but within the community they have feet of clay, and you see all the eccentricities and their weaknesses and uh, things like that. So that was one thing, and the other thing I wanted to bring out really was certain issues, I would say social issues, which are there in the community, things that people face, certain patients, which are real problems in this part of the world, especially to do with poverty and exploitation of poor people. I mean, I didn't want to make it sound too preachy, but I found that I
No.
could write the story, bringing out these points in an interesting way.
Yeah, especially where the poverty and where you talk about that, and that was very poignant, I thought. And I was glad you showcased that, because you're right. The medical profession is perceived as a very glamorous one. So you also give the reality check, you know. Um, so it was interesting. It's an interesting perspective actually to discover. Shall I read a little bit from your book too?
Yes, yes, Penali, thanks.
So Carmel has picked out this passage for me to read. So this is the beginning of chapter 9.
Yeah.
Nowhere is the medical hierarchy more evident than on ward rounds. Ward rounds take place daily, or sometimes twice a day. On the grand round, which usually takes place once a week, the consultant and his entourage review every patient in the ward in more detail than usual, discussing cases, sorting out problems, and of course, teaching students. The grand board round is a tradition that is conducted with pomp and ceremony, and reminds me of some archaic rite, almost religious in its solemnity. Every participant has their particular role to play in this ritual. The consultant, today Rambo, could be likened to the high priest presiding over the ceremony. Passing around him like a stout elderly priestess would be Matron Rani, the senior matron of the trauma unit, in her navy blue uniform, white stockings, and gleaming black patent leather shoes. With her elaborate starched white cap and huge pointy bosom, she looks like a ship in full sail. The young nurses would flutter around like vestal virgins, eager to please and ready to give the high priest whatever he needed. A stethoscope a stethoscope at his bed, a file or a torch at the next. The orderlies and attendants are the acolytes, carrying the paraphernalia needed for the ceremony and assisting whenever a patient needed to be examined, whipping off a sheet here, unbuttoning a shirt there. The younger doctors are the novitiates. The smug senior registrar with his beefy arms folded across his broad chest. He will soon be appointed consultant and would then play the main role himself. The new registrar, fresh from the Part 1 qualifying exam, full of knowledge but with little experience. The overworked house officer, a shirt crumpled and and tie a little crooked, looking harassed and sleep deprived, but in fact the only one who has any idea as to what is going on. And then, of course, there's us, the lowly medical students, lowest in the pecking order, bottom of the food chain. We are neophytes, postulants, newly admitted into the sacred order. Even our attire, what am I saying? Even our attire marks us out. The white coats we wear are shorter than the doctor's coats, denoting our lesser status. I hope I didn't botch
Thanks.
that.
Thanks for
But
reading that, Minali.
yeah, but I mean, this was my point about how you write about people and characters and how you describe it. I, I can see a ward round. I haven't really witnessed too many ward rounds, and I mean, I actually can like visualize the whole thing, and especially what you say about the matron. It's amazing. How do they grow these matrons to look like that? I don't know, but every matron manages to look like that. So you can tell them a mile off. So, so it's wonderful. But I and you chose this. So you chose this particular passage, and actually, I wanted to ask you, what has been the response from your colleagues within the profession to the almost surgical and penetrating spotlight you have turned on them? How have they responded?
Well, Mrinali, the response has been quite overwhelming and mostly positive.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
when I read this, I knew the medics would get it. I mean, when I
Right.
wrote this, sorry, when I wrote
Okay.
it, I knew they would get it because the medical parts of the novel, speak directly to them. Because these experiences are not just mine; they are collective experiences. Anyone who's studied medicine in any medical school anywhere in the world, there are certain common things. So I knew that that would speak to them. And so many doctors have called me after reading the book and saying, thank you for putting down these experiences. They brought back a lot of memories and
Yeah.
about their student days. And yeah, it's they've been really really positive. And some of them have in fact invited me to come and talk to the medical students about the book and things like that.
I hope you have said yes, and I hope you have taken them up on their requests. Please do,
Yes.
because you also share a different dimension. I mean, a medical student's life is a very hard one. I mean, I have two friends, very close friends who are doctors, and we've all studied together. There was no comparison between my study journey and theirs. So I hope you will go and talk to them. It'll give them, and you are the lowest of the low in the food chain. So you're writing about one of them.
The other thing I have done in the book is I've poked fun at the different specialties. Uh,
Yes.
Again, not in too bad a way, I hope, but that's another thing that happens in medicine. You always ridicule other specialties and you say your one is better than theirs. So there's a little bit of that in the book, which I think goes with the territory.
It happens in other professions as well, but yes. Okay. Um, do you mind if we talk a little bit about your title? Because it was very unusual to me, as I had never heard of. I actually thought it was sort of a made up thing. Because I've heard of cross patch and cross hatch, but I'd never heard of cross match. So, from those of us who are not in the from the medical sort of thing, would you like to explain a little bit?
Yes, I mean, I knew a lot of readers would be in the same situation as you. So at the beginning of the book, there's an explanation of the title. So it's a medical term which refers to the process, what is done before you can either give a blood transfusion or do an organ transplant. It's basically a test to see whether the tissues are compatible. And it's also a no, it can also be used in a non-medical sense, cross match, just to match something against
Hmm.
something to which it belongs. So really sort of to put something with a group with which it belongs. You match something against um, a group or another object or person. So both meanings actually are relevant to the story, both the medical and the non-medical meaning. So I can't give too much away again because I don't want to give out any
Yes. No, no,
spoilers.
no. That's enough.
But
That's
it tie the both meanings tie in very much with the story.
very clever. It was very clever. I loved it. I love those little touches. And, can I also ask you here?
Yes.
This wasn't in my storyboard, but you said you were a bit of an artist. Did you design your own cover?
Um, Yes, yes. I mean,
Okay,
I was in a situation where I had to come up. Once I decided to go ahead with publishing and printing, I had a deadline and
right.
I had to come up with something fast, and I didn't have time to look for an artist. So
Congratulations.
yeah,
It's so
thank you.
spot
I
on.
had, I, I mean, I had this idea in mind, and I was going to give an artist to do it, but there was not enough time to find an artist, and they would have taken a long time, but I had to do it quite fast. So I went ahead myself with the help of my teenage daughter, who helped me with the digital art side of it. And so we both produced this, and it was done on my smartphone.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not that not as hard as it appears to be.
So no pen and paper kind of
No, no,
thing. Everything
initially
digital
pen and paper,
paper. Ah,
then
okay.
you do the coloring on the phone in a
Wow.
digital app.
Wow. Okay. I really wanted to ask you that because you said you had dabbled in painting. I'm going to move on to our next section, which is what I call reading and reader whenever I talk to an author. So, my next question is on an aspect that is very dear to us at the British Council, which is reading. I recently went to the Vijitayappa bookshop looking for a book to buy, and we all know Nuan, who's at the Thurston Road branch, and he
Yeah.
immediately recommended your book. He said, "Fabulous book, very well written," and and then he said something to me. He said that you write so well because you are an avid reader. He said that you're at every book launch, you come and look for new books, you read right across a wide range. He said he seemed to know all of what you had been reading and buying from him, and that he said you use language without feeling the need to impress with your vocabulary to tell a good story and to keep the reader really engaged. And he said that he personally believed that comes from somebody who really loves to read. And I thought that was a very interesting comment and from an unexpected source almost to me, you know. And I think if you can talk a bit about your habit of reading and being a reader, that would really encourage, I think, a lot of people as well.
Well, I mean, I am a reader. I've I'm like most people I know who grew up in Colombo. From a young age, we used to read a lot. There may have been a bit of a lull in the years that I was in medical college, and then I took it up again in the last 10-20 years or so. But I consider myself an average reader, Mrinali. I mean, I read the standard books. I have a weakness for certain genres like crime and mystery, but I read a lot of fiction, not a lot of non-fiction unless it's very interesting to me. But I mean, I have to confess that there are lots of well-known literary works which I have still not tackled, or I have tried to read but failed to finish, and they are on my to be read list. And there are a lot of books I like to read. I have read which are totally unknown as well. So I mean, I, I don't know whether you would say avid, but I do read a lot. And when I like a book, I really sort of try to find out more about that book. Why did the writer write this?
Hmm,
Where
hmm.
did it come from? And things like that. And I mean, I still have a load of books to get through. There's so little time, so many books, as they say. So, I mean, when I was younger, I used to have a list of favorite books. It was quite rigid. But
Hmm.
as you grow older, you discover more books, and that list keeps changing. And I don't think it really matters what's in that list, but I think it's important to keep reading. And especially if you want to write, you can learn a lot from books that you read. I mean, I think it's essential.
And I also tend, if somebody I know who reads a lot recommends a book, I make it a point to try and read that book. Because if somebody who also reads a lot appreciates a book, there's a pretty good chance it's a good book, or it has something to be got from it. So, I mean, I know that these days time is a bit of a precious thing for a lot of people, but do you read online as well, or do you still read traditional paperback books?
I mostly switch to the Kindle now. like
Oh, okay.
80%, maybe 70% that way, and maybe 30% traditional books.
Okay. Okay. So, how can kids who are not reading get into the habit of reading? How have you managed to pass this on to your children? What did you do with them?
Well, I think first thing I learned was don't try to make them read the books that you read when you were their age, because something that you we liked, you like when we were young, it may not appeal to kids nowadays. So I tried that, but they didn't. It didn't work with them, because there's a whole world of books out there now for children. So I think you should get them to discover what's there, then, rather than ask them to read, the Magic Faraway Tree or something
I
like
was
that.
just talking about that today.
It may have been magical to us, but there's a lot of other stuff out there now that
It's still magical, Carmel.
kids like to read. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I think if they are, hooked to their devices, try to incorporate it into the device, especially the older kids. You can get the electronic versions of books. I mean, if you can't beat them, sometimes you have to join them.
Have you thought about putting your book out like that? Is it available
Yes,
digitally
it's
yet?
already available.
It's
It's
available
been out,
digitally.
yeah, for a couple of
Okay.
months. Yeah.
All right. I have no questions from the chat as yet, but I have a comment from Navaratna Marasinghe, who says, "Great interview and congratulations to the distinguished writer."
Thank you. Thank you.
But I we'll give them a little more time. If you do have questions, please put them into the chat, and Kamal will pick them up and we will talk about them. In the meantime, I want to ask you how you have been affected by the response to the book, positive and negative.
Um, well, the positive responses obviously make you feel good. It's like a high, isn't it, when somebody
Yes.
appreciates something that you've done. So that's been really great. The negative responses, I mean, I was bracing myself for negative criticism as well, because everything has, I mean, any book has got positive and negative reviews. So I've had a bit of negative criticism, which I was expecting. And basically, there are two types, I think. One type is the sort of the technical criticisms, of the work as a piece of literature, maybe things to do with the plot line and the descriptions and things like that. I think, if you look at it under with a literary microscope,
All right.
things
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I did try to plan it as much as I could, but I'm sure that there would be, there must be some room for improvement. So I mean, I wasn't too fussed by that. I'm sure there are, some deficiencies there. The other lot of negative views are from the squeamish people who who don't like to read about maggots and dead bodies and stuff like that. And honestly, I had a few complaints like that, but I wouldn't change that, even if I had to write it again, because that's the whole point of this book. It's a book. That's what gives it its flavor, I think. So in fact, some people said no. I mean, you could have included more
I'm sure.
medical description, more maggots
Thank
would
you
have
for
been
not.
fine.
This was, I think you hit the right balance.
So yeah, so I've had positive and negative. So I'm filing away the negative criticism. If in the event that I write another book, I'll bear those in mind.
I thought you are writing another book because now she has to become a
Who said?
doctor. Yeah, yeah. Now she has to become a doctor. She has to choose her speciality, and she has to become her own Rambo. So you can't now let it go. Now you've got the tiger by the tail.
Mrinali, this was supposed to be a one-off.
No,
It
no,
was
it's
an
not.
experiment. It was an experiment, and I finished the experiment. I don't know whether the conditions are the same, to repeat the experiment. In science, you have to have the same kind of conditions for the experiment to
No,
succeed again. So
but
I don't know. You won't believe how the number of people who told me things like, things that you've suggested, like they want to know what she does next. And they've, in fact, given me some plot lines for future books,
Excellent.
including her marriage and where she does her internship.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
And how many babies she will have to
so
start another book
I
with.
can't write other people's stories, so it has to come to me. So at the moment there's nothing in the pipeline, but I'll wait and see.
No, Kamal, it's too bad because when an experiment is successful, then there are ramifications. And you went and won the Gratian Prize with your first effort, so nobody's letting you off the hook.
Yeah, but one of the conditions of the experiment, one of the was total secrecy, like nobody knew about it. So there was no pressure at all. Now there is immense pressure. So I'll have to wait a bit till all this dies down, I think.
True. Oh, I have a question. Did you write with an awareness of a reader, or did you just write?
Um, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I'll answer it.
Mm.
I mean, I read it, I wrote it in a way that I thought readers would find it interesting. So I may have changed it a little bit, not to make it too technical, to make it interesting for a reader, especially a non-medical reader.
I think it also loops back to maybe what Nuan was trying to get at. That you write because you write this way because you are such what in his mind, or what he described as an avid reader. You kind of innately knew what was more accessible, perhaps, to a reader. Manika asks, says, okay. Oh, she says it has made her want to get a copy. Yes, you should. It's a wonderful book. It's in the library as well. So, can I ask you what has winning the prize meant to you?
Um, so, I mean, personally, it's a huge boost winning the Gratian Prize because, I mean, although family and friends read the book before and they loved it, at the end of the day, they are still your family and friends. You know, you have to. They have a little bit of, there's a little bit of bias there. But when the three judges of the Gratian panel uh, select your book as the best book, then that makes you really feel good about it. Yeah. And
Yes,
then, of course, the publicity that accompanies the prize. I mean, I could never have achieved that publicity without winning the prize. And the books have sold like crazy after the event. So this means, I mean, winning the Gratian means that more people will read the book. Really, that's the bottom line.
and it's so prestigious. I mean, it is our literary award, so it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I worked with the Gratian Trust off and on, and it's such a privilege, really. So, congratulations, Kamal. It's
Thank
just
you,
been
Mrinali.
wonderful.
Thank you.
I have no more questions in the chat, and I have exhausted my long list of questions that I don't think I should bombard you anymore. Thank you so very much for taking the time and spending all this time with us, and for all the preparation work that you put in with me. Congratulations again, Carmen, and please go, I don't know, move somewhere far away and start working on your second books where there's no pressure. So, and anyway, with COVID now, we are anyway living in our own little island. So I can't see how you are being pressurized.
No, but that's the
Okay?
problem, no, because everybody's at home. They're not going out. So there's no peace and quiet.
But I do hope that there will be a sequel, because I personally think that there's more to say, there's more to explore, and actually it's a voyage for everybody. It's a journey for. I think there are so many social things you can continue to bring to light and talk, because it's not just the novel. There was social commentary in it as well. There was insight into the medical profession. So there's so many bits and pieces going on here that you should explore also, and bring to light. So it's wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very
thank
much,
you.
Mrinali.
Thank you to our audience. Thank you for coming and watching us and listening to us, and for your questions. Thank you to Sajid behind the scenes, as always, for putting up with all the preparation that goes ahead with this. Thank you to our librarian and the team at the library. And for those who like the traditional feel of books in their hands, our online book ordering facility is available, and we also have a digital library. So please check those out. And Carmel, where can we find the digital version of your book?
It's available on Amazon, Minali.
It's available on Amazon. Okay, all right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Carmel. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good. Thank
Stay
you and good
safe.
night. Thanks for
Good
having
night.
me. Bye.
Stay safe and stay well. Bye.
Bye.